So many of us have goals that we want to achieve, places that we see ourselves, our dream life, and yet we keep falling short of just getting to where we want to be. And I think a big part of this is to do with the frameworks that we're using to think about our goals and our systems. Now, I've been an SRE, which is a site reliability engineer, for a couple of years now, and I started to realize as each day I was, doing my work, that the principles that we were using in development and in engineering applied heavily to real life and achieving your goals. And I got really excited, and I really want to share that here today because I know that the way you think about things, everyone's different. And so this may resonate with you and your journey to achieving your goals in ways other frameworks aren't. Hey, I'm Adam if you're new here, and in this video, I want to talk about engineering your dream life. So let's just get into it. So the first principle of SRE that I want to talk about is embracing risk and the blameless post-mortem. So with any development journey, whether you're developing an application or you're developing yourself health-wise, financially-wise, there is an element of risk associated with every leap that you take. Now, of course, we can try to mitigate against these risks, but they will always exist, especially if you're doing something that you've never done before, which is often the case in the journey of development. Take leaving your parents' house and moving into your first apartment, right? Like I've done before. That is a step that involves risk, right? But you may see that as a necessary step in your development, right? And you may consider things like my savings, your salary and all this stuff, but anything could go wrong. Effectively, I obviously hope that doesn't happen, but you could lose your job, or your landlord, especially in this crazy rental market, could decide, this isn't going to work for me anymore, I'm selling the house, or whatever. And so a big part of engineering in this way of embracing risk is knowing that, yes, in order to go to another step, we will have to accept that there is a risk associated with it. And yes, we'll mitigate against it, but if things go wrong, we know that we can be prepared to, bounce back from that. So now this leads me on to something called the blameless post-mortem. Now, I did a whole video on this before, and I'm really quite passionate about this as a concept. But in engineering, there's an idea that if things go wrong, we want to be open and honest about what happened, right? In order to get to the resolution quicker and to avoid it ever happening again. This is just the same when you do things in your personal life and take risks. And the reason this is so powerful is that if you take away blame, and especially shame, people will be more honest. And that includes you being more honest with yourself. If something goes wrong and you approach it from the idea of, I was stupid, I shouldn't have done this, why am I always getting everything wrong? Then you breed a culture where you don't even really want to face the realities of what happened in order to get to a resolution and to stop it happening again. And so employing the blameless post-mortem when things go wrong in your own life can be a really powerful tool in, the arsenal of weapons that you have against things going wrong or, just life in general. The second really key principle in this site reliability engineering is something called service level objectives, SLOs. Now, this is where you have clear objectives on what you are trying to achieve with your service or your system. Now, this translates into areas of our own life. So our service level, if you like, or our service may be health or finances, right? And it's really about getting clear on what you are trying to achieve there and removing ambiguity in order to progress. But linking onto the first principle, there is an acceptance even when you're creating these objectives that not everything will be perfect, right? So you're trying to be aspirational in terms of you want the best outcome possible, but realistic. And this is especially true if you're taking smaller steps towards an end goal, right? There are smaller, realistic goals that, when put together, may lead to something crazy aspirational. A second really important thing to consider, and this is a fundamental part of engineering, but it should be a fundamental part of life, is that the process is iterative. This means you can come back and change things up. If you are faced with new information, you are presented with new information about your health goal, right, or your finances. Say you've been saving £300 a month. But over time, you've realized actually it's quite easy for me to save £300 a month. I'm going to reconsider things, and the new objective is going to be £400 a month. That's because you've allowed yourself the room to iterate your objectives, and that can be really useful. And sometimes you have to iterate in the opposite direction, like, this was too ambitious, right? And I've done it and that's okay. But I think in order for me to be able to live a certain quality of life, I may have to bring that down to 150. And so you see how service level objectives are a mix of, we have high standards for ourselves, but we're not afraid when, having new information to change and pivot. The third principle is to do with eliminating toil and automation. Again, in engineering, you want to spend as much time as possible on the things that count, have the highest impact, right? And so you want to use your engineering time for that versus things that are quite manual or that you're going to have to do over and over again, and there may be a way to automate it. Let's go back to the money goal. Say you're wanting to save £200 a month. Now, you know that every time that you get paid, you should be putting £200 a month into your separate account. Automate that process. There are so many apps that allow you to, automatically on a specific day, so you're going to get paid on that day. The money goes straight, you don't even touch it, you don't see it, it's not, goes straight into that savings account, and you've automated one process that is linked to your wider goals. Another example of this in terms of more of toiling over the same thing over and over again is meal prepping. So you don't have to meal prep every single meal in the week. I think this sometimes can become quite overwhelming, but say lunches are an issue for you. And instead of every day thinking about lunch and, going through the process again of the start to the end of the process, packing it up, you do this all on one day. And again, this isn't quite like automating it away from you completely, but it does remove toiling on a daily basis effectively. Principle number 4 is monitoring and alerting, to be specific. It is so important to be able to observe your systems, right, in engineering, but also in life. Like if you don't know what's going on in your system, which is you and the things that you are doing to get closer to your goals, it can get easy to lose track of things, right? And the more complex the system becomes, the more room there is for errors to occur. And if you can't see them or you're not tracking them, that's how things slip away from you. Like maybe you're not tracking, say, your food in your early journey, and suddenly things are going out of control, and every single day you're eating in excess of what you said you would, but you haven't been tracking, and now your system is so far from what you wanted it to be that it's going to take a lot of effort to come back. So this is why monitoring is so important. I've said it before, but I'm like a tracking and monitoring fanatic, and perhaps being an engineer and SRE has influenced that further. But yes, I track my finances, I track my health, I track these things because it makes it clear to me what's going on. I can see my system, which is me in my entirety. And again, I can do things like iterate over them and decide, actually, I need to do this or I need to do that. My light just went off. That's really upsetting. And the final principle that I want to talk about today is simplicity, right? The more complex the system becomes, like I've said before, the more room for error there is and the more interlinked these things are. So if one thing goes wrong, it can heavily influence the other things. So doing things in a simple format can help you to achieve the goals that you want, right? And avoid over complex systems and dependencies. Like if you're trying to achieve a health goal where you want to lose a pound a week, or say you want to lose this much body fat in a percentage of time, taking simple steps towards achieving that goal versus a over complex system where you're doing all of these new things at once, you're introducing so many things into your system at once that if something goes wrong, you're not even sure what, triggered that. And so things that we call canary deployments in engineering, where you kind of you deploy the thing slowly, right? So you don't roll it out everywhere at the same time with loads of other features at the same time. Just to see what the impact is of that deployment. And so kind of combining that with simplicity can be a really useful way to keep your system relatively steady whilst you make changes. And this is kind of a nerdy video, but I really love thinking about the ways that things you do in one aspect of your life can like roll over into another one. And engineering has so many useful things that it's kind of crazy. And when you sit back and think about them, they can really impact your life and the quality of your life and the way you even just go about things. So I hope this was interesting to you, and let me know what you think about this way of approaching goals and a framework for building your dream life. But I'll see you in the next video.